Hi, it's Rory from counsellingtutor.com and I'm with Bob Cooke at the Manchester Institute for Psychotherapy.
Hi again, nice to be here.
I guess what we're going to be talking about is when nurture isn't enough. And
As a psychotherapist.
As a psychotherapist. We talk a lot about the necessary and sufficient conditions. We talk about, in person-centred therapy, we talk about the core conditions of empathy and congruence and unconditional positive regard. And as a trainee of person-centred counsellors, any one of my students would recognise this, I always say that sometimes, maybe in terms of best fit for clients, another modality may be more useful. So all therapists offer that kind of nurturing environment, or what we would hope so. So what happens, Bob, when that isn't enough, when the client isn't, or for some reason cannot accept that nurturing growth environment?
Yeah, so in transaction analysis we're into the theory about strokes. You've got positive strokes and you've got negative strokes.
Yes.
And stroke in TA is a unit of recognition.
Yes.
So what happens when you provide a nurturing environment and the client isn't able, for whatever reasons, to take in those strokes or take in that recognition and take in the nurturing, is the question.
Yes.
So, before I was a psychotherapist, we're going back 30 years ago, I was a politics lecturer.
Oh yes.
And I also, in my politics sort of remit, taught law.
Oh right.
And I was at Rochdale Technical College for a while, and I was at Stafford College. I remember I was about 29, or perhaps 30 maybe, and there was a call from Stafford Prison. It said, we'd like to have somebody to come and teach general principles of law to these golden prisoners on a Wednesday afternoon. Now I was quite into porridge. Do you remember porridge?
Oh yeah.
I thought, quite like to go see the workings of an inside prison. So I took the job up privately, and I taught these prisoners for 20 weeks the general principles of law.
Right.
And I learned something psychological there, which I often think about in context of what we're talking about now. And I didn't know anything about psychology back then, but this is what I learned. So here we are, I'm teaching general principles of law, tort, contract, whatever it is, and I say to these people, that's wonderful, you've really picked up that well, or I give a lot of compliments or strokes out.
Yes.
And invariably, Rory, the answer back was, what's the catch?
Yes.
So in other words, they were brought up in a family or a culture where there was a condition on the recognition offered.
Yes.
So zoom forward now 30 years.
Okay.
And when I'm with clients, I think about this quite often. And with people who've been brought up where they see almost like the recognition that you might attempt to give them as a trick.
Yes.
Or they're not able to take it in for whatever reasons. I will provide a mixture or a stroke cocktail.
Oh right, this sounds fascinating, Bob. Hope it's not alcoholic.
No, I mean psychologically. So I'll slip the odd positive stroke into a sort of negative conditional stroke.
Yes.
So for example, a client arrives late at a session, I might say, oh, well, I'm really not really happy that you're particularly late, but I like the fact that you came.
Yes.
And as they start to develop their empowerment of the self and get better, if you like, then what I would slip in more, positive strokes, and eventually they get more of a healthy psychological cocktail of strokes, if you like, which they then can start giving to themselves psychologically.
Yes.
So that's one of my responses to when I think of is nurture enough or not enough, is that the client has their own internal reference of what levels of recognition they can take or not take.
Yes. Yeah, and I could give you a really good example of this.
Over to you then.
Many years ago, you talk about working in prisons. I worked for an organisation called NACRO, who was primarily involved with rehousing of people who come from prison or people who have an offending background. And it's a really good organisation to help people who have an offending background move into society. It's part of the restorative justice system. Yeah. And I wasn't a counselling engagement. I was a support worker, but I can remember this particular service user. It's what the name that was given to the people we worked with. He was brilliant. He could play the guitar and he could sing, and he was really, really talented. And I used to hear him singing in his flat. You could hear him. And one day he came down, and I called him Fred, and I said, Fred, you're a brilliant singer, and you're really talented on the guitar. You know what he said to me, Bob?
What?
I'm sorry, I won't do it again.
There we are.
And I was absolutely gobsmacked, and I said, no, you don't have to be sorry, it's really good. He went, no, I'll do it again. And with that, I never heard him, certainly when I was on shift, play the guitar. And it was only as I kind of understood attachment styles and the more kind of nuanced ideas in therapy, that I realised that he just reacted to me as a parental figure. And he just basically shut down. And you're right, it's a mixture. And in my experience, maybe not as a counsellor or a therapist, but certainly when I worked in, within the environment of the criminal justice system, it was a case of just being very thoughtful about how you, and I think that's what you're saying.
That's what I'm saying.
How you put that stroke economy in.
Correct. So for therapists, stroke counsellors,
yes,
some tips.
Yes.
Number one, get to know your client's history first.
Yes.
If you get to know your client's history, then you will understand their stroke culture, if you like, what they are able to take and what they're not able to take. Because if you just continue to nurture them and they think you're tricking them, nothing much is going to happen.
They're going to become defensive and switch off therapeutically, aren't they?
Yeah. Shut down.
Shut down.
So you need to know the client. The other thing, another little story for you. I go to Gambia regularly. Gambia's a third world country, and if you go to Gambia and you talk to some Gambians in their compounds, every fifth or sixth word will be about food. And they are so poor. However, if I decide, right, next time I'm going to Gambia, and I used to go at Christmas, I'll take a wonderfully big Christmas meal with a lovely succulent chicken, lots of stuffing and gravy and sprouts and roast potatoes, and I'll go to the compound and I'll give it my friend the Gambian. You know what would happen?
No.
They would say, thank you very much. And if they attempted to eat it, they'd probably be sick. Because it would be too much for their stomach. Their stomachs would be smaller.
Yes.
They wouldn't be used to the richness of the food, and they'd probably have to be, expel it.
Yes.
So in other words, if we use that metaphor what I'm talking about, psychologically, they're not used to the high levels of nurturance.
No. I think that's a really interesting simile, isn't it, about using food. And sometimes it is about just thinking about, certainly in person-centered terms, about knowing your client, how you really, and that's about really kind of building that therapeutic conduit between you and your client, but also thinking about not overwhelming them. I know a lot of new therapists. Certainly when they learn, as we teach, the necessary and sufficient conditions, they kind of go into see a client, they'll come out and they'll say, I don't know what happened, Rory, and I say to them, Bob, you need a volume control. You need a volume control. You need to be able to turn them up and turn them down. They're not all at the same volume, and sometimes they're not all at the same time.
Yeah, that's right.
And I think as you've identified, as therapists progress, they realise that sometimes there's this trust phase that clients have to build with you, and that might be about just, like you say, gradually giving strokes, or as we would say in person-centred building, unconditional positive regard.
That's right. And in TA, there's a wonderful book written by Claude Steiner called Scripts People Live, 1974, where he talks about something he calls the stroke economy.
Oh yes, I heard this.
And the importance that therapists get to know their clients and understand their stroke culture and their stroke economy and fit to that accordingly. The other way would be often that they're overwhelmed, the client closes down, defends, and psychotherapy or counselling is a harder job.
It is. And I always say to my students, wait for the client. Wait for the client. The client is the person who will lead you, and if as you become, I guess, more experienced and more attuned, you will realise that that therapy is very nuanced. It's very, very nuanced. It's the equivalent of listening to an orchestra. You might hear the drums and the trombones and the basses, but you might be listening for that very little violin that's really set back in the music, and that's where the material may lie.
I really agree with you. And my last sentence will be from a client who said to me several years ago, and in that process of that hour, somehow I'd missed him, and he said to me, Bob, don't attempt to change me until you know me.
Ah. Yeah.
My last sentence.
Yeah, and I think that just about says it all from the clients onwards. Okay. So thanks, Bob. I hope that's been useful to anybody who wants to watch. And as always, thank you for watching.
Thank you.